astronauts, this is Brandy and I'm back with another astrology video, just as I said I would be. I am so frazzled right now. I have gotten back from vacation. I haven't even unpacked, so my whole area is a complete mess right now, but I want to get into this study, and technically I already finished it before I left, but I didn't have time to film it, so I'm just happy to be back and sharing it with you and the world. So this week's study is going to be on having no children in the astrology chart. I want to preface this by saying, just because you have this placement doesn't mean that you will not have children. I would also like to say that if you are somebody who deeply desires children or wants to have a lot of kids, first of all, you can watch my 4 or more children's chart. But secondly, I don't think you should be watching this video. I don't know if that is something that is mentally healthy for you. It could cause your mind to spiral in different directions and being like, well, I have this placement here, so that means I will never have children. No, that is not the case. What I like to do here is to see what placements are the most likely to not want to have children, not want to be childless. I only deal with most likelies. Astrology is not a definite thing. At least I don't view it that way. I know a lot of people, especially in this day and age, are going for a childless lifestyle. They want to be child free. And so if you're somebody who's single and who's dating, maybe you want to up your chances or increase that probability of finding someone who may also share those beliefs. Or, I mean, you could also just ask them, but but still, this is just something interesting. If you love astrology and then you also have that interest of wanting to be child free, then yeah, this would be a perfect combination and a perfect video, I should say, for you to look at. I personally just have a natural curiosity for these things. I have always wanted to know who would be child free, what placements would be more likely to have kids, etc., things like that, because children can be such a huge part of life, especially since it is something that is kind of pushed in the media as well, or normalized, as most people do tend to have children. That is why I say it is more normalized. It is more likely that somebody will have children than not have children. Any other reminders I want to say, feel free to comment and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram for any sort of studies or commentary that I do. I really do got to get that on and popping more. Definitely going to put this study on that Instagram so you guys have that photo version of it. And also you can follow me on TikTok if you just want to know more about my daily life, what I'm doing, what I've been up to. I like to vlog, I like to eat, I like to do things. I'm already working on a bunch of different stuff right now, so you guys already know the deal. I'm always doing stuff. Let's get into this study and let's not waste any more time because I have been blabbing on forever. So a little bit about the study before we get started. I used about 103 charts for this study, 102, 103, can't remember the exact number. And I took the charts of people who either died without having any children, whether that was by choice, whether that was they never got the chance to, whether that was any other case scenario, they died without having children. And also I took the charts of people who were basically, they're in a place in their life where they're not likely to have children. So someone who is a woman who is age 60, the chances are that she's more than likely not going to have biological children unless given a miracle. And I did look up this information and I found out that I think it's less than 0.02% of women will give birth over the age of 50. So I think it's fair enough to say that we can use the charts of women over 50. So keep that in mind as well. For men, I did not use that same factor for obvious reasons, because men can have children for a longer period in time, though I did include men who definitely said, hey, I do not want children. And if they're age, 70, I'm going to be yeah, I mean, I think it's fair enough to say this person doesn't want kids. That is some background on my study. Now let us get into it. Finally, I wanted to just give you guys that information so you guys had a good idea of what we're talking about and dealing with here. I talk so much, don't I? So the most important factors for not having children was not the same for having 4 or more children. When determining whether a person would be child-free and would not have biological children within their lifetime, the most important factors included the sun sign, the Venus sign placement, and the Jupiter sign placement. And the secondary factors of importance would be the house of the ascendant ruler, Venus house placement, and Mercury sign placement. The sign placement that is least likely to have children is Taurus, followed by Aries. And to recap, the sign placement to likely to have 4 or more children was Aries and Capricorn. This is interesting because we see the sign of Aries as being on the polar opposite end of the spectrum of most and least likely to have children. On further inspection, we can look at the nakshatras and padas to see if there are any differences. Let me state that I would like to gather more charts of Sun and Aries individuals to see more of a transparent pattern. However, based on the data that I have, Sun in Kritika, Pada 1, was more than likely to have no children. Sun in Ashwini, Pada 3, is also more likely to have no children. Meanwhile, Sun in Bharani, Pada 2, would likely give 4 or more children rather than none. The full scope of everything is still unknown, but we can make an educated guess that planetary conjunctions also play a role in having or not having children. For example, here we have the charts of Renee Zellweger and Friedrich Franz, the Grand Duke of Mecklenburg, both who have their sun in Ashwini in the 9th house conjunct Saturn and Mercury. Neither of these two had or will have biological children. On the other hand, we have the chart of Janet Dowling, sun in Ashwini, Pada 4, in the 9th house, but with no planetary aspects or conjunctions, who had 4 children. Another example is those charts who had Sun and Bharani, Pada 1. Majority who had this placement were childless, with one exception, Hirohito, the Emperor of Japan, who had Venus conjunct his Sun, aspected by Jupiter. Meanwhile, those who received aspects or conjunctions from more challenging planets like Uranus fell into the no children category. It did not matter if they also received aspects from benefit planets. Now for the Venus sign placement. The Venus sign placement, most likely to be child-free, is the sign of Pisces, followed by the sign of Gemini. To recap, Venus in Aries was the most likely to have 4 or more children, followed by Pisces. It is fascinating to see Pisces appear highly on both charts, the charts of having no children and the charts of having 4 or more children for Venus sign placement. On further inspection, we could see exalted Venus in Revati Nakshatra being most likely to have no children, while Venus in Uttara Bhadrapada being the most likely to have 4 or more children. If we look at the padas, Uttara Bhadrapada, Pada 4, is more likely to have 4 or more children, even with aspects from malefics. With the exception of Princess Mary, who had Sun in Bharani, Pada 1. As mentioned before, this placement, which is more likely to be childless, this is why it is important to look at all factors, and it is also important to take in the significance of those factors. For example, as I mentioned previously, Sun sign being more important than Venus sign. As for Venus in Revati, Pada 1 and 3, Venus is most likely to be childless. In terms of aspects, when comparing Venus and Revati Pada 3 charts to those without children and to those with children, we can start to see a difference. Those with 4 or more children all received aspects from Ketu, while those without children received none. It is possible that Ketu's aspects is ironically having an amplifying effect on Venus. We can theorize that Venus in Revati Pada 3 on its own is naturally inclined to being child-free. But under the influence of Ketu, there is a shift. However, I reiterate, we must look at all factors. Now moving on to Jupiter sign placement. Once again, Jupiter sign placement has made it into the top 3 important factors when it comes to children. This reiterates the importance of Jupiter as being the significator or the karka of children. The Jupiter sign placement least likely to have children is Jupiter in Virgo, followed by Jupiter in Taurus. And to recap the 4 or more children study, we see that Jupiter in Virgo being in the most likely to have 4 or more children. If we look at these 2 placements, we can see a clear difference in nakshatras. In the least likely to have children study, we see Jupiter in Chitra is the highest scoring nakshatra, while in the 4 or more children study, Jupiter in Uttara Falguni being the highest scoring Virgo placement. Now on to secondary factors. The house lord of the ascendant ruler was the most important secondary factor. Having the ascendant ruler in the 6th house was the most popular placement for being child-free, followed by the 12th house. Then there is Venus house placement. Similar to the ascendant lord, Venus in the 6th and 12th house was the most popular placement for having no children. Lastly, the Mercury sign placement. Mercury in Taurus, followed by Aries, was the most popular placement for having no children. If you recall the 4 or more children chart, you'll remember that Mercury in Scorpio, which is opposite of Taurus, was the most popular placement, also followed by Aries. We can go to the padas to gain insight on the differences. Ashwini, pada 1 and 2, are seemingly likely to have no children, while Ashwini, pada 3, is likely to have 4 or more. Bharani, pada 4, is likely to have no children, while Bharani, pada 1, is more likely to have 4 or more. And Kritika, pada 1, is likely to have 4 or more children. Now on to the rest of the results, and I will repeat the results of the main factors as I go in order, just so it's more organized for you guys if you want to click back on this video. Sun sign placement most likely to be child-free is Taurus, and second is Aries. The most popular sun sign house placement for no children is Sun in the 7th and the 12th house. Interesting how the 12th house has come up again. And for nakshatra placements, Kritika and Rohini. Now on to the moon. The most popular moon sign placement to be child-free is Moon in Cancer and Leo. The most popular moon sign house placement for being child-free is Moon in the 12th house, followed by the 1st. 12th house is certainly coming up a lot. And if you remember, Moon in the opposite house, meaning Moon in the 7th house, was the highest scoring planet for creating 4 or more kids. So it's interesting how those 2 dynamics are now opposite. And when it comes to nakshatra, Moon in Magha was the most popular placement. On to the ascendant. Ascendant in Gemini was the most popular placement for being child-free. The ascendant ruler in the 6th and 12th house, as mentioned before, were the most popular placement for no children. And the ascendant ruler, being Vishaka or Ardra, were the most popular placement for having no children. On to Venus placement. Venus in Pisces, as mentioned before, is the most popular placement for having no children. In second place, we have Gemini. Venus being in the 12th or 6th house, and Venus being in Revati. And you know, it's kind of interesting how an exalted Venus leads people to either just be child-free or make the decision to be, or kind of end up in that situation. It's different for everyone from what I've seen. And I just say it's interesting because I've actually met quite a few guys who had their Venus in Revati, and a lot of them just did not want kids. And I just tend to date a lot of Venus and Revati people. I'm going off track, but I have just gone on dates with people who had a lot of Venus and Revati placements, and they did not want kids at all. They were so adamant about it. So it's just nice to see that astrology is confirming, because I have that, obviously, that anecdotal experience, and it's interesting to see that it came up again in a study. So, little side note, but not important. I just like to talk a little bit. That's it. So on to Mercury placement. Mercury in Taurus, followed by Mercury in Aries, was the most popular placement for people who are child-free. Mercury in the 5th house, followed by Mercury in the 10th. And for nakshatra placements, we have Mercury and Barney. Jupiter in Virgo is the highest placement for having no children. In second place, we have Jupiter in Taurus. And then when it comes to Jupiter house placement, Jupiter in the 6th house, which is interesting because that's pretty much similar to Virgo. And Jupiter in the 1st house still scored high in the no children's chart. So I'll definitely have to analyze that later, but this is supposed to be like a brief study. We're not supposed to analyze every little thing. I've already analyzed the different padas. And then, as previously mentioned, Jupiter in the nakshatra placements of particularly Mrigashira and Chitra were more likely not to have children. So those are the results. And it was interesting, I'll say, because I want to give my thoughts a little briefly. It was interesting to see how there wasn't like a super clear dominant nakshatra when it comes to sun, moon, and ascendant. And I thought there might be, because I was like, well, there's certain personality types that seem like they don't really want to have kids like that much. Like, I knew some sort of sun rule placement would probably come up. And I also figured some sort of maybe K2 ruled placement would come up and be popular as well. And obviously we had the sun in Kritika being popular, and then we also had moon in Magha being the most popular. And so I did have some idea about those two, but I thought it would be like similar nakshatra across the board for those. I will say though, I didn't realize that Vishaka would come up popular in the sun rule chart as well as being in the ascendant chart. So I guess if there ever was a popular nakshatra for those sun, moon, and ascendant, then Vishaka would be the one, because it came up 3rd in the sun ruled. It tied for 1st in the ascendant chart. So that's a little bit unexpected because it is a Jupiterian nakshatra, and it's not really what I just would have perceived to be a popular placement for either I guess not having children, being child-free. I've never really thought of that placement as that. But then I haven't done like a full-blown study on Shaka Nakshatra or Vishka. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Like, I'm trying to work on my pronunciation of the nakshatras. So bear with me on my pronunciation. When it comes to them, I see a lot of different videos pronounced several different ways. I'm not sure what the correct way is for everything. But those are my thoughts on that. I don't really have anything deeper to add at this point. I feel like I would have to do people having like 1 to 3 kids, because that seems to be like a, you know, an average amount these days. Granted, people tend to having less kids, but I don't think people are too shocked if somebody's like, I have 3 kids. Nobody's like, oh my God, 3? Like, but I'll have to look at that chart and then I'll compare it at some point. But you guys know I do have some other videos to do. I've already started, like I said, on the disabilities chart, and I've already started on the moon ruled men charts video. I don't think I'm going to do the same format as before because it kind of takes too long doing all the different like imagery and stuff. I'll probably stick to more of interviews and things like that because I prefer that quality, and if I do see clips, I'll answer them, but just be aware of that format. But yeah, that is all I will talk about for now. Hopefully you found these results interesting. There's so many other videos I want to get to and do. I'm super excited for what is to come, and I will see you guys next time. Au revoir.